Hello, everyone. Happy spring, and welcome to today's webinar all about the IEP designation process and the benefits of the IEP designation. My name is Tim Hines. I'm the Executive Director of UEDA, and I will introduce our guests in a few minutes. But before we begin, I just want to share a few housekeeping items. Of course, if you have any questions, you have the questions panel that's in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to type your questions in there. We will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation today. And if for some reason you're having any technical difficulties, you can use the chat feature that's also in that right-hand sidebar, and we will be able to assist you in any way possible there. Everyone today is going to be on mute except for our presenters all throughout the webinar. And today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be sent out to all registrants via a link over the next 48 hours. And then it will also be posted to the UEDA YouTube channel, which you can access online. So with that, we'll get started, and I will introduce to you first Sean McMillan. Sean is the Director of Economic Development for the Atlanta office of the University of Georgia. Now, Sean earned his bachelor's degree in business administration and finance from Auburn University in 1988 and his master's degree in business administration from Georgia State University in 2000. He joined the Georgia Department of Economic Development in 1992 as both budget director and assistant director of administration, holding those titles until 2000. Over the following 10 years, he served as senior project manager and director of existing industry and recruitment and director of new business recruitment. Since 2008, Sean has played a key role with Georgia Quick Start, the state's workforce development program, serving as director of regional and KIA project operations until his recent appointment at UGA. And Sean also told me that he would not be in his position that he is in today had it not been for the IEP designation process. So as part of their self-study at the University of Georgia, his role was created. So he provides a unique perspective, but definitely is very engaged in the process at UGA. So we're excited to hear what Sean has to say, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. So today's webinar, first I want to talk a little bit about what UEDA Plus is, which might be a new concept for most of you. I want to talk a little bit about the IEP designation, what it is if you're not familiar with that, and then really get into some discussion on why the designation is important. We want to talk about what you can expect as it relates to the process for the IEP designation, and then how you actually kick that off and get started. And of course, this is a well-respected designation that many of you are familiar with, and it's a program that UEDA is now thrilled to offer as part of to our members as part of a member benefit, and that's a result of our partnership with APLU. And we do that through the UEDA Plus program. The UEDA Plus program provides access and discounts to products and services for members of our association. So if you're a member, you have access to the UEDA Plus program. Think of it as things that you buy or purchase or get access to, in this case, on a regular basis. So, regular affinity programs might have things like office supplies and such. We provide access to economic development consulting, grant writing, and things like the IEP designation. So on behalf of our members, UEDA has established these strategic relationships and negotiated special deals and discounts from leading providers in order to increase the value of membership for its organizational members. So there's really, if you're a member, you have access to the program. There's really no additional thing that you need to do. And of course, our memberships are institution based or based on the organization. So if one branch institution is a member of UEDA, then everyone at that institution, at that branch, has access to the UEDA Plus program, and of course, all the other benefits of UEDA membership. These products and services are available to all those contacts, and in order to maintain access to the benefits of the UEDA Plus program, all organizations have to do is maintain your regular UEDA membership. So if you're a member, you have access to the UEDA Plus program. And how that works is, as it relates to the IEP designation process, is that really it's the same group, same system, same process that APLU members are going through. It's just we're providing access to that through UEDA Plus. APLU cannot provide this program to anyone outside of their membership, but through the strategic partnership of UEDA and access through UEDA Plus, now you're able to participate in the same cohorts as APLU members. And that goes for anyone that can be a UEDA member. So UEDA membership is international. UEDA membership includes all campuses from community colleges, 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions. So it doesn't matter your institution size or scope. We're able to provide the IEP designation process to you through the UEDA Plus. All you need is a UEDA Plus, a UEDA membership, which gives you access to UEDA Plus. So I'm going to ask Sean to kind of kick off and talk a little bit about the designation and why it's important to specific audiences within the various organizations. So Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning to some of you. As Tim mentioned, my name is Sean McMillan. I'm with the University of Georgia, based here in Midtown Atlanta, on Georgia Tech's campus. And why Georgia Tech's campus? This is the center of all statewide economic development efforts that go on both at the public and the private sector here in Georgia. And as Tim mentioned, as part of going through the IEP process, one finding from our survey of over 3,275 people and a facilitated one-day session on where should the university be headed, what is it that we should be doing to better engage with the economic development community, this office was created. And so I've been in this role for a little over 5 years. The IEP process was initiated before I came on board, 6 months actually before I started. But as I was talking to Tim earlier, it was a very thoughtful and inclusive process. And it truly was led from the top. This was a presidential initiative, an initiative of our Vice President for Public Service and Outreach, Dr. Jennifer Frum, and our Vice President for Research, Dr. David Lee. And I can talk, of course, about the designation, but I'd like to give some anecdotes about the experience. Initially, as the application was put together and submitted, but also 5 years afterwards, we just recently in November submitted the 5-year update, and really was a great process to go through. But I highly recommend you consider pursuing the IEP designation. We have certainly had a tremendous amount of value, both throughout the entire university at the economic development level, but it's truly been transformational in many areas at UGA. So the IEP designation, see that basically it's easy enough to read these bullets here on this slide 7. But I'll point out, I agree that it is a rigorous self-study of the institution's economic engagement efforts, including internal and external stakeholders, much as what I just described that UGA went through. Tim, you want to advance the slide? So just a few of the universities that have earned the IEP designation here on this slide. Very broad based number of institutions across our great country. And a few comments from those that have actually gone through the process, and I'll let you read those for yourselves. So let me just talk about both this slide and the following slide. So the following slide is, why is a designation important externally? And again, just speaking just about the University of Georgia's process, for us, it was a process designed to be able to, again, get a very diverse group of stakeholders, both at the state level and the local level and regional level, in the state of Georgia together to help the university decide what is it that we're doing well now, or what is it that we should be doing better. And there were, for us, we went through a survey element, as I mentioned earlier, and the data identified 3 areas of accomplishment, which were creating an environment that benefits the public, assisting governmental and business entities, and technology commercialization and research support activities. And the findings actually came up with 3 primary areas where UGA could improve its performance, which are partnering for economic growth, facilitating interactions between the public and the university, and communicating economic development contributions. All 3 of those points I just made were at the core of our IEP submission back in 2013. And when I go back and talk about our regional stakeholder meeting, we asked 3 simple questions. What are the things that we should be doing? Where do we need to go? And what must we do to get there? So it was a very, I think, intensive process the university went through, and really led us to come up with several other points, which is, for us, what we wanted to do was to support and strengthen university community partnerships, and including those that involved applied research and the use of academic facilities by industry. Also, we wanted to facilitate the better interactions between the public and UGA. 1, making it easier for faculty to learn about the ways to interact with the community personally and professionally. 2, increasing the focus on industry contracts, including those involving faculty directly with industry. 3, providing necessary infrastructure in the research office to support faculty engagement and integrating public service and outreach faculty more directly with traditional academic faculty. And finally, I would say, in the area of communicating economic development contributions, the university truly has been working very hard to message out to our stakeholders about the things that are important to the university, that speak specifically to work that we're doing in the communities at a regional level and at the state level. So yeah, I would say for us, the fact that we had the support of our leadership from the very top and our vice presidents, and they were very intentional about us pursuing the IEP designation, which was exceptionally helpful to us. So, I mean, that's it. Anecdotally, at a summary level. And Tim, you want to advance the slide? And we truly feel that this designation is important to the university, and we're very much all in ensuring that we continue to maintain that status. But I will also say too that as a part of this effort, we have really worked hard to engage with UEDA, and in particular over the last 3 years, we've had more participation from those involved in economic development, both in the public service and outreach area, and also in the research and innovation area. We've submitted for the Awards of Excellence in 2017 and 2018, and we're very fortunate to have been selected in both of those years, 3 programs each that were designated as finalists. And we had 1 category winner both in 2017 and 2018. And the reason I bring that up is I feel like what the engagement with UEDA has done is it's truly allowed us to engage a broader cross-section of the people at UGA who were involved in economic development, day in and day out, and we've truly benefited from that relationship. And I would encourage you, if you're not a member, to please join.
Yeah, and if I could ask a question too, I think a lot of folks are familiar with the UEDA Awards of Excellence program that you referenced. If and that celebrates and recognizes best practices an initiative level or for a project. What the IEP designation really does is it not only celebrates the institution's economic engagement and sort of, I don't want to use the word certifies, but it shows the commitment to economic engagement. It also sets forth a plan to operationalize that engagement. Is that an appropriate statement, that sort of the awards of excellence are pieces of this, and this is really the broader recognition?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Tim. And exactly, I mean, the IEP process is a much more comprehensive, university-wide, I don't know what the appropriate term is for this, but basically just for the university to really look deeply into how it's engaging in the economic development world in the state in which university is located. And what is it that we're doing well? What is it that we need to improve upon? And begin to implement programmatic changes if necessary, administrative changes if necessary, but begin to build that structure that allows the university to be engaged and relevant in the space in which it's located. And again, I would say for sure it's definitely something you should consider if you haven't before.
Yeah, and I think that's, as we get into the process, I think that's why we really try to highlight the various aspects of the designation and what it means both internally and externally for the organization, but also what it means internally and externally for administration, and then also as practitioners. So there's definitely benefits throughout that folks realize by going through the self-study process and actually showing their commitment to economic engagement. And it's nice to know too, we're going to get into this a little bit, but that you're not doing it alone. There is a learning exchange that you gain access to as you're going through the designation process, that you're allowed to understand other best practices and where other things have come together. But I mean, over 60 organizations have participated in this process now since I believe it was since 2013. So over 60 have been are through the process, or in part of the process of some kind. So this is the process that we're talking about. So it goes from intent, which is the stage that we're in right now, to pre-designation, to designation, to the interim report, and to renewal. And I'm going to go through each of these separately so that you can get a sense of what each part of the process is all about. So right now we're in the intent stage. You're learning about the IEP designation. All of you are that are on the call are in the intent stage. So we're sharing IEP designation information with colleagues. So obviously there's going to be some internal sales that need to likely happen, right? Sean was lucky that UGA or University of Georgia was really, it was a top-down approach. It's not always the case. Sometimes we have to sell that up. So that's really what this webinar is all about, and why we're starting this process so early, because we recognize that sometimes that takes time. This pre-designation process, or this designation process, only happens once a year, and I'll get into the deadlines for that later on, and it's later this fall. So it's important to start the process now of sharing this information with colleagues and trying to make that internal pitch as it's necessary. After you do that, after you have that buy-in, the next step is to complete a letter of intent with the leadership. And that's a letter that's signed by the president or chancellor of the institution. And we have a template for that. It's very simple. You email us, and then we send you the template, and you can complete or edit it as you see fit. But it shows your letter of intent to participate in the program. And then you receive in return a participation agreement and an invoice. And that sets the motion forward for expressing your intent to participate in the next cohort and move forward with the IEP designation. So then we go into pre-designation. So after you've signed your letter of intent, fees are paid, everyone's on board, then you join that next cohort, which will, in our cases for this year, starts in January of 2020. and then you'll prepare for and then begin that self-study, and that's going to be part of what you work on. This all takes about 1 to 3 years. So you actually have 3 years to complete this pre-designation process. You'll submit that self-study. You can submit it for comment to the review board. That means that it's not up against penalty. It's just up for review and comment, and then you'll receive it back. And then you can actually, at some point in the future, submit it for decision of designation once you feel that the comments have been addressed and everything is up to the standards of the board. From this step forward, in the pre-designation process, you're able to attend the APLU, and this should be CC, which has been combined. SICEP is no more, but there's an APLU CC summer meeting that's coming up this year in June. And then you'll participate in the IEP startup cohort learning community. So you have a support network and a system that allows you throughout this entire process to bounce ideas off colleagues, to share content, to share thoughts, and really build this network up of others that are working to ensure that their institutions are engaged within their regional economies. So then we'll get into the designation. I'm sorry, we're going to talk about the self-study first. Let's talk about the self-study. So that self-study, and I'll ask Sean to chime in a little bit, but the application is about 20 to 30 pages. There's narrative description of the process and the whole entire university economic engagement enterprise. You identify 3 areas of university accomplishment and economic engagement, and then supporting evidence of that accomplishment. 3 areas of growth improvement and evidence to support that need for growth improvement. The application form is online and allows for the addition of hyperlinks, but photos and documents need to be added as attachments. 1 month prior to the application deadline, you'll confirm your plans to submit an application either for comment or for decision. Again, this is something, a process that takes anywhere from 1 to 3 years. Different organizations are different sizes, as you saw in a previous slide. They all have different areas of impact and take different time to complete the actual self-study process. If you submit for comment only or submit for decision and do not receive the designation, then you have to wait 2 submission cycles before submitting again. The submission cycles do occur more than just one time annually. The one-time annual is the entry into the cohort itself, but the cycles occur every, I believe it's every quarter. Again, that's part of the APLU process, and then you get notified within 2 months if what that status is, whether you've been approved for that or whether you are receiving comment back. You'll get that notification within 2 months. New designees will receive communications assistance regarding their status. They'll be honored at a ceremony at the UEDA Summit, and then also be encouraged to apply for the UEDA IEP University Awards once that's been initiated. And that's something that doesn't happen for a number of years, since we don't have cohorts that have, since our first cohort is this year right now, that we have folks engaged in the process. So 2020 will be our second cohort, and we expect those folks to be wrapped up within 3 years. So. Sean, any insight into the self-study? That I know that you didn't participate in your self-study, but I'm sure you've heard in doing your 5-year report plenty of stories. Anything you'd like to add to that process?
Yeah, I'll just go back to our outline for our submission. As I said earlier, we were very deliberate in surveying a wide variety of people that were representative of the economic development community in Georgia. And again, we conducted a workshop to really bear down on where we needed to improve. Then we went into some specific adjustments at the administrative level, such as transferring our Office of Economic Development from the Provost to the President's Office, establishing an industry liaison office, establishment of the Economic Development Office in Atlanta, revising our mission statement, creating new curricula, and something that really over the last 5 years has taken off at the University of Georgia expanding upon, at the time in 2013, we submitted existing entrepreneurial efforts. And we had 2 programs that existed at that point. But what has happened since was that we've established a certificate in entrepreneurship, which when it was launched had roughly 30 students in it. We're up somewhere north of 600 currently. A revamped effort to create more startups through a cohort process in our startups actually led by faculty and students, and connecting with our local not-for-profit incubator in downtown Athens, amongst other things. But truly, that sort of idea that came out from the process that we went through for the submission to really engage more with entrepreneurial-minded faculty and students it has really begun to take off at the university. So I go back and say the self-study process, if it's done properly and includes a wide variety of people across campus, can really be powerful and transformational.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not just about create a self-study, get a designation, put a seal on the banners like you saw earlier, although that's an important part of the process, right? But it's really about transforming the institutions that are engaged in the process and moving them forward to a deeper commitment to economic engagement. And you know, I think that the process that APLU has put forth has really really shown that. So it's rigorous, but it's definitely rewarding. So back to our timeline. Again, we talked about the self-study. You can submit that self-study for comment or for decision, and then again, you can participate in the learning exchange in the summer meeting moving forward. Excuse me. Let's get into the designation. So after you're designated, you celebrate, number one, and it's important to note that designation is what starts your clock, and we'll get into the clock once we get into the timeline. But that designation is really, think of that as day zero. That day zero it sets other factors into consideration, and then we'll also recognize any new designees at the UEDA summit that's in the fall. From this step forward, again, once you're designated, now you can start to apply for the IEP awards. The IEP awards, UEDA is going to have a separate awards process for the IEP designation, separate from the APLU IEP designation. It really just has to do with the differences in membership. We're keeping the awards separate, but the program itself is the same. Much of that, though, I'm sure will be modeled off of the APLU the APLU awards. So then we get into the interim report. The interim report is it happens at year 5. So I mentioned that clock, that's day 0. So 5 years in, your interim report is due. And this is where you explore significant changes in your institution's economic engagement enterprise since the designation. So what has changed since over the past 5 years? You have to describe any progress that's made on the growth and improvement plans, as well as new areas for growth and improvement, and share practices that you've learned and adopted through the IEP Learning Exchange. Again, that's part of the broader IEP network that you have access to as it relates to going through this designation process. Then you at year 10, so after that 5 years, at year 10, you're designated to, you're able to submit your application for renewal. So it's a little bit more broad and detailed than the 5-year report. Of course, we haven't had anyone do this yet. The IEP designation has only been around since 2013, so we'll see that in the next couple of years. The first institutions having to submit their application for renewal, so you can renew for that designation, and you can go through this whole process again. So you submit your application for renewal, then you do another 5-year interim report, and then at year 20, we'll call it year 20 from when the clock starts, then you have to go through the process all over again and start the self-study. So you're able to go through this process twice without having to go through the complete self-study all over again. You're working with the same plan, because obviously in 20 years, things are going to change drastically. And it's likely you'll need to do a self-assessment again anyway. So that's why that's that's one of the requirements. So looking at the timeline, so the letter of intent is due by the upcoming deadline, and that's going to be October 31st of 2019, and I have that on a future slide. The pre-designation process takes 1 to 3 years. The designation is day 0, and then you have the interim report, which is due in year 5, and then the renewal in year 10, and then starting the cycle all over again from designation. You do the interim report in year 15, and then you can apply for another self-study at year 20. So what's next? What's next as it relates to this year? So obviously, October 31st is a long time away, but I'm sure that there's materials that you would appreciate reviewing. You can find those at aplu.org/IEP. Again, it's the same process. We're just giving you the access through UEDA. If you are an APLU member, we encourage you to go through the APLU process and contact APLU. However, for anyone that's not an APLU member that is looking to participate in it as a member of UEDA, first make sure that you're a member of UEDA, and then we can work through the process of getting you on board. So once you're set and you have that internal commitment from your institution, you can email me, and I will send you a letter of intent template that you can share with your leadership. You can edit that template as you see fit, put it on your letterhead, and then submit it back to me. You can request funding and support from internal stakeholders if that's necessary. But then once you submit that letter of intent, it's due to us by October 31st of 2019. You'll receive an invoice typically within a day or so after that letter of intent has been received, as well as a participation agreement. That participation agreement has more details about the 5-year process, the 10-year process, and gets into who the primary contact from the institution will be as it relates to the overall program, and so on and so forth. So you'll receive that on November 1st. Or by November 1st, but it'll be likely within a day or two after submitting that letter of intent. And then you'll return that to us by November 30th to UEDA along with your first payment. And then the next step is to join the cohort in January of 2020. Again, this is a process that only happens once a year. So this year's deadline is October 31st. I don't anticipate that being extended, but APLU sets that date, and they extended it for 2019 because of our conference that's taking place in September and beginning of October, just in case there's a few other folks that want to join in. As soon as you submit that letter of intent to us, then you can submit the agreement and payment back right away. It doesn't have to take until November 30th, but that is the deadline. So those are deadlines. And of course, then the cohort starting January of 2020. So how do you get started? So the pre-designation fee. So these are the fees for those folks accessing the program through UEDA. One thing you have to do, as I mentioned, in order to continue to gain access to the UEDA Plus program, is you have to keep up with your dues. We give you a slight discount because of you paying those dues all in one lump sum. So with the agreement and 3 years worth of dues, seeing as it would take you anywhere from 1 to 3 years to complete the designation, or I'm sorry, the pre-designation, it's $1,900, and then the IEP fees are $15,000. Now there are some enrollment-based fee discounts, and those are listed on your screen, and I won't go through those. But if you do have specific enrollment sizes that qualify for those fee discounts, all I ask you to do is let me know, and I will just verify that, and then we will apply that discount to the invoice. The dues stay the same. As far as annual engagement, so after you're designated, so those fees are for the first 3 years, essentially. If you take 3 years to actually complete the pre-designation process, those are for the first 3 years. Upon designation, then the annual engagement fee is $1,000, and then maintaining your UEDA dues of $645. At year 5, you have a 5-year interim report due, and that's a $5,000 fee plus the UEDA dues of $645. And then at 10 years, you have the $10,000 renewal fee, and it's plus your 645 dues. So annually, you're going to have $1,000 due plus 645, so 1645 due after designation. That keeps your membership up to date, and that keeps your IEP designation up to date. At year 5, the $1,000 is replaced by a $5,000 fee, and same for year 10 at the $10,000 fee. So that said, that's really the end of our presentation today. So I want to open it up for questions. So if you haven't done so already, make sure that you type your questions into the question block that is in the GoToMeeting panel, and we'll get to those as we go through. And the first one we have is, how many non-land grant universities have the designation? I'm not sure that I know the answer to that as far as the public institutions go. I know there's over 60. As far as UEDA members that are participating in the program, again, 2019 is our first year for that. So we were accepting folks in 2018, and they just started in January of 2019 here. We have 2 UEDA members that are participating in this program, just as I described it right there. So we expect that to continue over the course of the year. I know that we've had many folks that are trying to align some of their internal structural needs. Perhaps there's a change of leadership. Perhaps there's a search for a new VP of research or something along those lines that I know had prohibited folks from participating last year that are looking to do so this year. But that's something that we're looking at having an increase this year in folks that are participating. And it's great to have institutions that are now participating that are not just land grants and public institutions, that all folks and higher education institutions that are participating in economic engagement are able to participate in the program and participate in that IEP learning exchange, because we can all learn from each other. Sean, have you participated in the learning exchange, and can you comment maybe a little bit about how a diverse group of institutions as part of that learning exchange might help you as someone that's gone through the process and participating in it right now?
Tim, one of the things I did not mention is we've also been blessed that we have 2 associate vice presidents, one within public service and outreach and the other within the vice president for research's office, Dr. Steve Dempsey and Dr. Derek Eberhardt, who have both been engaged in the IEP quarterly process. And Steve Dempsey in particular has been the person who has been the single point of contact for the University of Georgia in sharing the information with the learning exchange each quarter. And so I would say that that's a very important consideration for those that go through the IEP process and earn the designation, is to have someone function as a single point of contact, and then that person then can gather appropriate information as requested each quarter for those discussions. So just a thing to consider for those on the call.
Thanks, Sean. Going into our next question, so I'm going to actually flip back to the fees slide to discuss it. And the question is, if I complete my designation the pre-designation process to get the designation in 2 years, what happens to those fees since you paid for 3 years of membership? And that's a great question. Of course, your membership is active for 3 years with UEDA with that pre-designation fee line item for UEDA dues. So that would carry over. So you, in year 1, with the following the designation in year 1, you would only owe the $1,000. You wouldn't owe the additional membership fee. So your membership fees are it's not prorated, but they're accounted for and sequential. So the IEP fees are based on the designation dates. The UEDA dues are based on the calendar year. So that's a good question, and something that's important to clarify, that we'll adjust that as we move through the process. It's just important for us to have that commitment and make sure that your dues are maintained throughout the course of the year. And oftentimes it's easier for the institution. I've heard that it's easier for the institution to just take care of it all in one swoop rather than trying to get dues annually from institutions. So that's really what the structure is for that. Those are really all the questions we have. Hopefully that's because we were pretty thorough in the explanation of why this is important and how it plays out. That said, Sean, I didn't know if you had any closing comments to make before we kind of wrap things up today.
The other thing I would add, Tim, is that I think going through this process does one thing that's really important. It builds relationships across campus that otherwise perhaps wouldn't exist. And I think in our case, we've really worked hard to identify those key points of contact and meet on a regular basis, face-to-face and virtually and so forth, which really has helped us strengthen, our bond, our commitment to economic development at the university. And those things take time, as everyone knows, but I think that the designation and sort of going through this quarterly process of gathering up information is one way in which we can continue to stay in touch with one another and focus on ways in which we can improve our economic development efforts across the state.
That's a good point, and I think that anyone can attest to the fact that if you're working together on a project, you have more commitment and buy-in than if you're just sitting in committee meetings. We see that from an organizational level at UEDA. So whenever there's actually tasks to complete and a goal in mind, and everyone's focused on that goal, it's definitely something that really engages folks and gets them involved, and that's an important part of the process. So that's a good point. We did have one other question come in, and we'll answer it real quick. Actually, there's two. Are there some areas where you're seeing a lot of institutions have difficulties completing the process? I'll just speak to what I've heard, and then Sean, maybe you can offer your input too to that. I think that you think you have 3 years, and you think that that's a long time, and it's really not. That's really the toughest part of the process is motivating from the beginning. And I would say that the folks that have succeeded and moved through the process quickly, and not quickly, but we'll say efficiently, are those that did submit for comment, that got feedback on their plans, that didn't wait till the last minute to submit them. I think that's really where a lot of the struggles occur, is moving through and coming up against the deadline and really being crunched. I haven't heard any horror stories of submissions not making it through based on the timeline, but I know that is a point of stress for some folks. Sean, do you have any insight into that?
Tim, I can talk about the 5-year update process, which I was involved with. And to your points, what we decided we would do is go ahead and outline sort of the dates in which we were going to get together face to face. And we had a task list, and we had the questions in front of us on the 5-year update, and then together began to fill in the blanks. And fortunately for us, as I said earlier, one of the goals that we had at the outset in the application was to improve our communication to our internal and external stakeholders. And I give credit to our marketing and communications efforts at the university level, and also within public service and outreach, and also in research, that have done a wonderful job of storytelling, and have highlighted many of those things that we had set out to improve upon. So we had honestly a lot to choose from. in completing our 5-year update. But basically, we just kept each other accountable, and through the leadership of the 2 associate vice presidents, we were able to polish up our submission and get it submitted last November. So just a few thoughts, going through the process. I wouldn't say it's painful or there's no horror stories. I mean, it was just, we just kept each other accountable, and had a goal and had a way in which we were able to get where we needed to go.
I think the question also stems from trying to, is there an issue gathering information that's necessary for the self-study process? And I think in reality, that's exactly why we have the president sign off on it. That's exactly why we want to have that letter of intent, so that buy-in comes from the top, so that all resources are or should be available to the team that's actually completing the self-study process. So there shouldn't be those roadblocks if that level of commitment is there. So we want to make sure that it is, which is why presidential commitment is necessary right from the letter of intent process, so that they know what's going on and they are supportive behind it and putting the resources necessary to make sure that that's accomplished. So I don't have a slide for it, but I do want to say that if you're interested in hearing a little bit more from institutions that have gone through this IEP designation process, we have 2 additional webinars that are coming up. We had one yesterday, and it was on talent. The one on April 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Pacific is on innovation. And then the last one is on place, and that is on April 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Those are a really interesting series. It's a very engaging webinar. It polls it's polls for the audience. It's more of a talk show format, and it's hosted by Jim Waddell, formerly of APLU, who is hosting these for us, and it follows the 3 areas of engagement for UEDA, which are talent, innovation, and place. So we had talent yesterday, and a great discussion, very engaging webinar. We have another one coming up, like I said, April 9th on innovation and April 30th on place. And if you'd like more information about that, you can email me at UEDA. Again, my email address is on the screen there, tim.hines@universityeda.org. Or you can find more information at our event portal. We're building out a new website. It's in the works. And as soon as we get all the little pieces connected, we'll be able to have it. But there's a quick link that you can go to. That's just ueda.eventbrite, and that's brite.com. So ueda.eventbrite.com, same registration portal that you registered for this webinar, is where you can find information about those other content pieces that also talk a little bit about the IEP designation and feature IEP designated universities. So with that, I'd like to thank Sean. Thank you for your time being here today and sharing with us a little bit about what UGA went through and your efforts, and congrats on your role and all the work that you're doing down there. But had it not been for the IEP designation process, you wouldn't be in that role. So we're happy that the designation process exists, and that you're able to join us today and throughout the year as also a UEDA board member. So thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure.
And thank you all for being with us today. Any more questions, please feel free to email me, and we look forward to getting your inquiries about the letter of intent and the process as we approach our deadline of October 31st. Bye-bye.